My mother took her own life after a tumultuous lifetime of bipolar disorder when I was 14 years old. I felt cheated out of a family, and I desperately wanted one. When I met my husband, he seemed like family material, and I made it very clear that I was looking for the whole package. We met in January, married in June, and by Thanksgiving I was pregnant. My first pregnancy wasn't easy. I was sick every day, all day long, but I was grateful. I delivered a healthy, beautiful baby girl who was and is to this day everything I ever wanted in my firstborn. I decided to wait until my daughter was a year old before trying for a second baby. Everything about my second pregnancy was different from the first one. I was so sure that this was our baby boy. Our first ultrasound at 5 months revealed the baby was a girl. I assumed that it was an error. My due date arrived, and I actually gave birth that very day. The delivery was as easy as the pregnancy had been, and before anybody knew it, our second daughter was born. She came out and immediately peed on me. I think it was prophetic. Our second child was the extreme opposite of her sister in every way. Eating, sleeping, toys, and interests were vastly different. Their father and I joked that they were daylight and dark. My youngest child earned the nickname Destructo because she would effectively destroy any toy or gadget that came within her vicinity. She cut the hair off of dolls and put graffiti on any surface that would hold it. She was my challenge, and when she was 3 years old, she insisted that we all call her Jackson. We assumed this was a phase. All of the parenting books and magazines told us that when a baby is born, you count 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a P or a V, and you're good to go. For years, we raised a very unhappy child. We dealt with depression and ADHD, which was later more accurately diagnosed as bipolar disorder. Our daughter began therapy, and at the age of 14 informed us that she was gay. That revelation wavered a bit over the years. Shortly after my youngest turned 18, I received a Facebook message from her that said, "I'm not gay, I'm transgender." I replied, "You can be anything you want to be as long as you graduate high school." But I was upset when I understood that the plan was to live as male. I could imagine my child being the punchline of jokes, my friends being embarrassed for me, and I was afraid that the life that she was choosing to live was going to be a long way from what I had envisioned for her. I didn't understand her confusion about who she was. My husband and I, not to mention our older daughter, were not receptive to the idea of transition. My child sought medical transition on his own. Budding with new insight into his identity and with testosterone coursing through his veins, my son was now indignant that we see him as he was supposed to be. I said horrible, hurtful things, if I spoke at all, as if my displeasure and discomfort would change his mind. He angrily gave us about 1 month to adjust, and when we didn't, he ran away. My husband dealt with the situation by turning to anger. For me, it was tears. I would cry any time I was reminded of the child who left me. I would enjoy our family outings, but I would become maudlin in the middle of them, missing the family member who enjoyed them too. I watched my friends celebrate their children's graduations, and I was devastated because I couldn't do the same. My husband and daughter felt powerless to help me through my sadness. After my son ran away, I learned from friends that he had moved to Arizona. We had few conversations. When we did connect, it was filled with anger on his part, tears, and hurt on mine. He didn't understand why I wasn't happier that he was being true to himself for the first time in his life, and I couldn't understand why he was doing this to me, as if it had anything to do with me at all. The turning point occurred one day when I told my son that, although I may not agree with the way he approached it, I felt that he was very brave for leaving home to begin his new life. I started getting used to the idea of having a son, and our conversations became easier. I understood then that I would rather have a child who was not what I thought than to not have that child at all. About a year after he had left, he moved back to Atlanta and lived with friends. We began visiting and getting to know each other again. I discovered that he was the child I raised, just in a different package. Soon after, a change in his medication led to a brief stay in a psychiatric hospital. Upon discharge, he moved back home. Within a few months, he urged me to go to a conference where there were other transgender people and their families. By then, I was supportive of his transgender status, particularly when I had to explain it to family or friends. I often say that it was at that conference my life was changed. The family meeting was scheduled to last for 4 hours. I whined to my son, "What could we possibly have to discuss for 4 hours?" But by the time it ended, I had told my story, laughed and cried while others told theirs, and held on to hugs that I didn't want to end. I met others who had the same story, and I no longer felt alone on this quest. I have met many people who are on the same journey. I began seeing a therapist and have joined several support groups for parents of transgender children. I no longer consider myself just supportive of my transgender son, but an ally and at times an advocate. I will never forget the best advice that I got that day at the conference: love him or lose him. The choice is clear. It's love.